It's strange how something so small can grow into something so big, something that changes everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your life. It all started with a simple question, one that I never thought would matter. But it did. And now, I'm here, writing this out, hoping that someone might understand what I've been through. My name's Derek, and I've been married to Lila for almost 6 years now. But I'll be honest with you, what I thought was a perfect marriage is now a faded memory. What happened? How did I get here? Well, it's not as dramatic as it might sound. There wasn't some big betrayal, no cheating scandal, no loud fights. It's the little things that change everything. The little moments when you realize the ground under your feet isn't as solid as you once thought. At first, I didn't notice. How could I? Lila and I had been in sync for so long that it felt impossible that anything could break us apart. We didn't have kids, so it was just the two of us, which meant we had all the time in the world to do whatever we wanted. But over the past few months, something shifted, something I couldn't put my finger on. It wasn't her fault, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Maybe it was my job, the long hours, or just the pressure of life. But I felt a distance that wasn't there before. And I hated myself for noticing it. I tried to ignore it, like any reasonable person would. I told myself it was just a phase. Relationships go through ups and downs, right? I kept myself busy with work, with hobbies, with anything that didn't make me confront the feeling growing inside me. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad, I was just unsettled. But everything changed one Saturday afternoon. That's when the world flipped upside down for me. It had been a typical Saturday. I spent the morning at the gym, then came home to grab lunch before running a few errands. Lila, as usual, was still in bed when I left. She had been staying up late, binge-watching some crime documentaries, or at least that's what she said. I never thought much about it until I returned home a little earlier than expected. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone talking on the phone, loud enough for me to hear through the hallway. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a friend or a family member. But then the tone of the conversation hit me like a punch in the gut. I could hear Lila laughing. And then, for the briefest moment, her tone dropped into something lower, more intimate. "I can't wait to see you again. It's been too long," she said. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I thought I misheard her. I should have done something then. Should have walked into the living room, confronted her, asked who she was talking to. But instead, I froze, standing there in the kitchen, like some fool waiting for the inevitable. I listened. I don't know why, but I did. I listened to the entire conversation. And what I heard next chilled me to the core. "It's been hard, you know? I've been trying, but I just don't feel like we're in sync anymore," she said, and the pause that followed was heavy, full of hesitation. I don't know why, but hearing those words, "not in sync anymore," hurt more than anything. They weren't harsh, but they were truthful. And truth can be a knife when you're not prepared for it. I tried to rationalize it, tried to tell myself that maybe it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe she was talking about her job or something else entirely. But deep down, I knew what was happening. I knew she wasn't talking about work. My first instinct was to leave, to walk out the door and give her the space to finish whatever it was she was doing. But no, I stayed. I was too curious, too desperate for answers. So I waited. When she finally hung up, I heard the sound of her footsteps coming down the hallway, and my heart pounded in my chest. I didn't want to face her. I didn't know how to face her, but I did it anyway. She stepped into the kitchen, saw me standing there, and immediately froze. Her eyes widened, like a deer caught in headlights. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, my thoughts were a mess. "Derek," she started, but her voice faltered. "I didn't know you were home." I wanted to say something, anything. I wanted to ask her who she was talking to, why she sounded so different. But the words didn't come. All I could do was stare at her, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She looked at me for a long moment before her gaze shifted to the floor. The silence hung in the air, suffocating. I don't know how long we stood there, neither of us speaking, but finally, I managed to ask, "Who was that?" Lila hesitated, and for the first time in a long while, I saw fear in her eyes. "It was a friend. Someone I've known for a while. We just talked, that's all," she said quickly, as if her words could erase the heaviness of the situation. But I wasn't convinced. The tone of her voice, the way she wouldn't look me in the eye, it wasn't just a friendly conversation. I could tell something was wrong, but I didn't push her. Not yet. I had no idea what to do. Instead, I said something stupid, something I regret now. I said, if there's something going on, we can talk about it. And she didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she were measuring her next words carefully. I'm fine, she said a little too softly. Really, I am. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her, to move past the tension. But the doubt had already settled in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake it. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, and the question that kept repeating itself over and over was, what was I missing? But I didn't have the answer. And little did I know, the question would soon become much harder to ignore. The days after that phone call were like a blur, and yet, each moment seemed to drag on forever. Lila was different. She didn't act guilty, but there was something about her that felt distant. It wasn't just her distracted glances or the way she kept her phone hidden. It was more like an invisible wall had been built between us, one I couldn't tear down, no matter how hard I tried. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I'd overheard. Not in sync anymore. Those words repeated themselves in my mind over and over again, a constant echo that left me restless and uneasy. I wanted to confront her, ask her what it meant, but a part of me was terrified of the truth. What if I was wrong? What if I was just overthinking everything? But then there were the little things. The way she began coming home late more often. The way her smile seemed forced when we'd talk, like she was pretending to care. There were even moments when I caught her staring out the window, lost in thought, like she wasn't even in the same room. I tried not to let it bother me, but the more I ignored it, the harder it became to pretend everything was okay. One Friday evening, I came home from work earlier than expected. The house was quiet, too quiet. I called out for Lila, but there was no response. I figured she was in the bathroom or on a call, but when I walked through the living room, I froze. There, on the coffee table, was her phone, unlocked. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what came over me, but I picked it up. It was stupid, I knew that. But the curiosity was overwhelming. The screen lit up, and immediately, I saw a new message notification from an unknown number. Can't wait for tonight. We need to talk about everything. Just us. That was it. My stomach dropped. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air felt thick with something I couldn't explain. I didn't need to see more. I already knew what this was. It was confirmation of everything I had been avoiding. Lila was seeing someone else. But why? Was it something I did? Or worse, something I didn't do? The flood of questions crashed through my mind, and I felt myself losing control. I didn't know whether to confront her immediately or give myself time to process it all. I put the phone down, my hands shaking, and tried to calm myself. But it was impossible. The reality was setting in, and I had no idea how to deal with it. So I waited. I waited for Lila to come home, to face me, to explain what I had just discovered. But when she finally walked through the door, looking just as carefree as ever, I knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, babe, what's up? She asked, but her voice had a hollow ring to it. I tried to keep my voice steady. Who's the we you're talking about? She blinked at me, clearly not expecting the question. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up her phone from the table, turned the screen toward her, and watched her face change in an instant. She was quiet, staring at the message as if she had been caught in the act. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry, didn't apologize. The silence between us stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not what you think, Derek. But I knew. I didn't need her to explain. The words were already spoken, and the truth hung in the air like a suffocating weight. She had been hiding something from me for a while, and now, everything I thought I knew about my marriage was crumbling around me. I felt numb, disconnected from the reality of it all. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? But the real question was, what now? I wanted to demand answers, to hear her say it out loud, to admit what she had been doing. But a part of me didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear the truth because I knew it would destroy me. So I did the only thing I could do. I walked away. I walked into the other room, away from the woman I had loved, and closed the door behind me. I needed space. I needed air. I needed time to figure out what had just happened. The sound of her footsteps following me made me hesitate, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. Not when the trust had already been shattered beyond repair. And as I stood there in the silence of our home, I realized something that would haunt me for days. I had no idea who the woman I had married even was anymore. I didn't speak to Lila for the rest of the night. She tried to talk, to explain, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear in my head were those words, "Can't wait for tonight. We need to talk about everything. Just us." The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of a fool I had been. The signs were there. I had ignored them, brushed them aside, hoping everything would get better on its own. But now, there was no denying it. She had been seeing someone else. The next few days were a blur. Lila stayed at her mom's house. She told me she needed space. I wanted to call her, demand she come back, but I didn't. Something inside me knew that the truth would break me even more. So I let her go. The house felt empty without her. The quiet was suffocating. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every moment, every glance at my phone, brought me back to that message. Just us. Who was this us? Was it someone she had known for a while? Or had this been something new, something that had been growing between them? The unanswered questions ate at me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her betrayal or the fact that I had ignored the signs for so long. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. It was like my whole world had been turned upside down, and I couldn't find my footing again. It wasn't until the third night, when I finally went through her things, that I found it. It wasn't like I was looking for something to confirm what I already knew. But I had to know. I had to see if I could understand how everything went wrong. I went through her desk, her drawers, even her email. That's when I found the ticket. It was a plane ticket. For two. The date on it was just a few days ago, the same time she had been out that night. The destination was a small city, not far from here. I stared at it for what felt like hours. A sick feeling spread through my chest. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to call her, ask her why. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more answers. I needed to know everything. And that's when I made the decision. I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I had ever planned to do. It wasn't me. But something inside me snapped. I needed closure, and I wasn't going to get it sitting around. I didn't know when she would come back, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. The next day, I tracked her movements. I knew she was still in town, that she would eventually come back. I didn't know when, but I couldn't sit around waiting. So I waited. That night, she returned. She texted me when she was outside, saying she was ready to talk. But I didn't respond. I watched from the window as she stood there, her face drawn and tired, waiting for me to come out. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the same guilt that had haunted her for days. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching her. But I didn't go to the door. Instead, I grabbed my coat and walked out. I had no plan. I had no idea what I was doing. But as I stepped into the night, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would be the same again. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. I don't know what I was expecting when I stepped out of the house that night. Maybe I thought I would confront Lila. Maybe I thought I'd catch her off guard. But all I knew for sure was that I had to see it for myself. I had to understand what was going on, who she was becoming, and why everything felt so foreign between us. I wasn't prepared for what came next. I followed her car, keeping a safe distance, not daring to blink for fear I would miss something important. I watched her turn left, right, weaving through streets I had never seen her take before. Her movements were sharp, calculated. I knew then that this wasn't some innocent meeting with friends. No, this was something else. Something planned. She eventually stopped at a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city, one that didn't look like the kind of place she'd usually go to. I pulled into a parking lot across the street, hoping to remain unseen. My heart pounded in my chest. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching as Lila walked up to the door. She didn't look back, didn't check her phone like she usually did. She just walked, with purpose. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I just knew I had to be there, in the shadows, watching, waiting for the truth to unfold. She stepped inside, and I sat there, frozen. A part of me wanted to run, to get out of the car and confront her right there. But I didn't. Instead, I just watched the light above the door flicker as she disappeared inside. I waited, not knowing what to expect, but fully aware that I was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. 20 minutes passed, then 40. I didn't know if she was inside, or if I was just torturing myself. But then, the door opened. Lila stepped out. She was with someone I didn't recognize. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, his hair a bit messy like he had been running his hands through it. They were talking quietly, But as they walked towards a car parked just a few spots down, I saw something that made my blood run cold. He placed his hand on her back. She didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned into him slightly as they reached the car. They didn't kiss, but the way they were standing, close, intimate, almost like they had done this before, sent a chill through my bones. I watched them drive away, my mind racing, my chest tightening. My eyes kept going back to that moment, the way she had leaned into him, the comfort that was between them. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was just seeing things. But the reality of it was inescapable. The truth was now undeniable. Lila was seeing someone else. And not just any someone. This was someone who had her attention, someone who was more than just a friend. She was invested, and I had no idea when it had begun. I sat there in my car for what felt like hours, my mind reeling. I couldn't go back to the house. Not now. Not after everything I had seen. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. So I drove. I had no destination, no plan. I just needed to keep moving, to keep my mind from spiraling. But eventually, I found myself parked at the edge of a quiet street, staring at my phone. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. I had to confront her. Not tomorrow, not the next day, tonight. I didn't know if I was ready to hear her answer, but I was sure of one thing. I couldn't keep pretending. Not after what I had seen. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to let her keep walking around with secrets. I had to end this. Once and for all. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but something inside me snapped. I had followed Lila, seen enough to know this wasn't just a misunderstanding. She was having an affair. And for the first time in days, I felt a strange clarity, as though the fog that had clouded my mind was finally lifting. I drove back to the house, my grip tight on the wheel, every inch of me burning with the need for answers. I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. When I walked through the door, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, as if nothing had changed. She didn't even look up when I entered. It was as though we were living two different realities, and for her, nothing had shifted. But for me, everything had shifted. "Lila," I said, my voice steady but raw. She looked up, startled. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Hey, babe," she said, a bit too casually. "You okay?" I didn't respond immediately. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own home. "Who was he?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, she looked away. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tight, betraying her anxiety. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone, showing her the picture I had taken of her with the man outside the bar. I watched her face drain of color as she realized I knew. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself. She knew there was no point in denying it. "Derek," her voice cracked, but she quickly cleared her throat. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Then how did you think I'd find out?" I shot back, my anger simmering. "How long, Lila? How long has this been going on?" She looked down, her fingers fidgeting in her lap. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. It just did. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Don't give me that. You chose this. You're not some victim here, Lila. You've been lying to me for God knows how long. And now you're telling me it just happened?" She winced at my words, but I didn't care. I was beyond holding back. I had a right to know the truth, and I wasn't going to let her hide behind excuses anymore. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I never meant to hurt you." "Sorry." The word tasted like acid in my mouth. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Lila. I've been living with a lie for months. A lie that's been tearing me apart inside." She stood up, but instead of stepping toward me, she took a step back. The distance between us felt like a chasm, and no matter how much I wanted to close it, I knew I couldn't. "I didn't want to hurt you," she repeated, her voice now trembling. The tears in her eyes only fueled the rage inside me. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me. "You didn't just hurt me. You betrayed me. You chose someone else." "I never wanted to hurt you," she said again, and this time, her voice cracked. She reached out, but I stepped back. "No," I said firmly, the words slipping from my mouth before I could stop them. "You chose this, and now you have to deal with it. I don't know how we move past this, but right now, I can't even look at you." She stood there, silent, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't care. I couldn't. I had to protect myself now. I wasn't going to let her continue to destroy me. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone with the mess she had created. And as I left the room, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to forgive her. I spent the rest of the night pacing. The silence in the house was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the image of Lila's tear-streaked face from my mind. But something inside me had changed. The hurt, the betrayal. I couldn't let it consume me. I needed to make sense of it all, even if that meant facing a reality I wasn't ready for. The next morning, Lila was gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter, but it didn't matter. I didn't need an explanation anymore. I knew what had happened. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her empty apologies. The damage was done. The house felt colder without her. I walked through the rooms, touching the objects that used to mean something to me. Our pictures, her favorite books, the little things that made our life together feel real. Now they just felt like reminders of a life that no longer existed. I couldn't stay there. Not like this. So, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in the place that had once felt like home. I ended up at a hotel. A cheap, anonymous place where no one would know me. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to disappear. For the next few days, I stayed in that hotel room. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my emails. I didn't want to face the outside world. I just wanted to let the pain sink in, to allow myself the time to process everything. But it wasn't easy. It never is when your world comes crashing down. One night, I found myself sitting at the small, dimly lit bar downstairs. I wasn't looking for company, but somehow, the bartender started talking to me. He was older, his face lined with years of hard living. We exchanged small talk for a while, and before I knew it, I was telling him everything. He listened. He didn't judge, didn't offer advice. He just let me talk, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. "I don't know what to do," I said, staring down into my drink. "She's gone, and I can't even bring myself to care anymore." The bartender nodded, wiping down the counter. "You'll care again," he said quietly. "But it won't be the same. Trust me." His words stayed with me long after I left the bar. He was right. I would care again, but not in the way I used to. Not in the way I had loved her. That version of me was gone, and I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back. By the time I returned to the house, I was a different person. I didn't feel the need to confront Lila anymore. The anger had faded into something colder, acceptance. I had accepted the truth, as painful as it was. But there was still one question I couldn't shake. Why? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering what had driven her to this point. Was it me? Was I not enough? Or had she just fallen out of love? I needed answers. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear them, but I knew I had to ask. It had been a week since Lila left, and the silence in the house was deafening. The space felt hollow without her presence. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper memories of better times, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape them. I found myself walking through rooms, touching things I didn't want to touch, trying to hold on to whatever sense of her was left behind. But everything felt like it had slipped through my fingers, like sand in an hourglass that had long since run out. I wasn't sure what I expected when the knock came at the door. I didn't even hear it at first, lost in my thoughts as I stared blankly at the television, unable to focus on anything. But then, there it was again. A knock, sharp and insistent, pulling me back to the present. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't sure I wanted to see anyone. But something about the knock stirred something inside me, and I found myself walking toward the door before I could stop myself. When I opened it, I froze. There stood Lila. She looked different. She wasn't the same woman who had left a week ago. Her face was pale, her eyes red from lack of sleep, and there was a look in them, a mixture of regret and something else I couldn't place. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out at first. For a moment, neither of us moved. It felt like a standoff, two people caught in the aftermath of something too big to repair. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry, Derek." I stared at her, unsure of what to say. Sorry. The word felt foreign, coming from her. Almost too little, too late. Sorry doesn't fix this, Lila. Sorry doesn't take back everything that's happened. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to talk to me. But I needed to see you, to explain." I stepped back, instinctively moving out of the way, unsure if I even wanted her in the house. But she didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, looking around like she was stepping into a place she no longer belonged. "I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for," she said, her voice shaking. But Derek, you need to know that it wasn't about you. It wasn't because I didn't love you. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. Then what was it about? Because from where I stand, it looks like you just threw everything away. You threw me away. She shook her head, her hands trembling as she fidgeted with the hem of her jacket. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I got caught up in something, in someone, and it became so much easier than facing the truth. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear how it just happened. But there was something in her eyes, something raw and desperate, that made me pause. Who is he? I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. Lila flinched, taking a step back. I don't want to tell you. I don't think it matters anymore. Of course it matters, I snapped, stepping closer. You didn't just fall into some guy's arms, Lila. This was a choice. And now you're telling me it doesn't matter? I didn't know how to stop it, she whispered, barely audible. I got so caught up in the lie that I didn't know how to get out. Her words hit me like a punch. I had never seen her like this. There was no defiance in her voice, no walls between us. It was just raw vulnerability, and it terrified me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. Why didn't you just talk to me? You think I wouldn't have listened? She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it on my own, that it would just go away. But it didn't. There was a long pause, the silence between us thick with everything unsaid. I wanted to scream, to ask how she could have done this to me, how she could have destroyed everything we had. But instead, I just stood there, numb. Derek, she said quietly, almost pleading. I didn't want to lose you, but I knew I was already losing myself. The words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I understood. It wasn't just me she had hurt. She had been losing herself long before any of this started. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I even wanted to. But before I could say anything, she took a step forward, placing her hand gently on my arm. I'll leave, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. And I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not understanding. Just that you know the truth. And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, unable to breathe, unable to move. She was gone again. But this time, something had shifted inside me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wasn't the same person who had walked into this mess. Neither was she. But sometimes, even the truth isn't enough to heal the wounds we carry. And I didn't know if I could ever find my way back to the person I once was. Days passed after that conversation. I spent a lot of time alone, sitting in the quiet of the house, trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't easy. I won't lie. There were moments when I was tempted to reach out, to try and fix things, to pretend like it was all just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. I started focusing on myself again. I picked up old hobbies, things I hadn't done in years. I went back to the gym, started reading books I hadn't finished, and slowly began to find peace in the little things that had once brought me joy. I wasn't over everything yet, not by a long shot, but I was learning to rebuild. One day, about 2 weeks after Lila had left, I received a message from her. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Her words were simple, but they meant something. I'm proud of you for taking the time to heal. I hope you're doing okay. I thought about it for a while before responding. I'm getting there. Thank you. I hope you are too. That was all we said. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was the first real communication we'd had since everything fell apart. There were no apologies, no explanations. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we had both been hurt, but we were both moving forward. The next few months were filled with more small steps. Lila kept her distance, and I respected that. I needed space, and I think she did too. But every now and then, we would run into each other, at the grocery store, at a coffee shop, even at mutual friends' places. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. Instead, we started to find a new rhythm, a new way of being around each other. Slowly, we both healed in our own ways. And then, one day, Lila texted me again. This time, it was an invitation. She had signed up for a painting class, something she'd always wanted to do but never made time for. She asked if I'd like to join. I didn't hesitate. It wasn't about rekindling what we had before. It wasn't about rushing into anything. It was simply about two people trying to understand each other again, from a place of respect and honesty. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. We met at the studio the following Saturday. It was awkward at first, sitting next to each other, not really knowing what to say. But as the hours passed, we fell into a quiet rhythm. We didn't have to speak to feel comfortable. And when the class ended, I realized something important. We weren't the same people we once were, but that didn't mean we couldn't move forward, separately or together. We had both grown, had both learned the hard lessons life had thrown our way. And though I wasn't sure what the future held, I knew this. There was still room for us to heal, to grow, and maybe, just maybe, there was still room for a friendship, if not more. It wasn't perfect, but nothing ever is. What mattered was that I was no longer trapped in the pain of the past. I had found my way back to myself, and that was the most important thing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Not for the past, but for the future. A future where, maybe, things could finally be okay.